and the art. We have Denise, Theresa, Jeff, and Antonio with us today, and we're so very glad to have them and you in this session. So welcome. Please know I want to go over a couple of things with you today before we begin. I want to take some time out to acknowledge the volunteers who've helped to put together this conference for the last year, so we want to acknowledge them. I also want to introduce myself. My name is Amina Humphrey, and I will be your host. I'm also on the steering committee of the Critical Media Literacy Conference of the Americas, and I also help to organize the art, race, and social justice sessions. So again, thank you for being here. I also want to note this. Please follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn at CMLCA, the number 4 ALL. Also, please, this session is being recorded. If you are under 18 years of age or prefer not to be recorded, please turn off your video and remove your name in order to be anonymous. Also, if a problem occurs and the Zoom closes, first try to re-enter the same Zoom room, and if that doesn't work, go to the lobby on the visual schedule of the conference labeled Help. So those are a few notations for us there. Now I turn to introducing our great presenters for today. Theresa Redmond. Theresa is an associate professor of media studies and teacher education at Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina, USA. Her teaching and scholarship focus on the intersections of multiple professional fields, including communications, media studies, literacy studies, educational technology, curriculum studies, and the arts. Welcome. Denise Chapman. Denise is a counter-narrative storyteller, spoken word poet, and critical autoethnographer who lectures in children's literature, early literacy, and inclusive children's media at Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. She uses oral stories, children's literature, poetry, and digital images as counter-narrative windows for social disruption and liberation. Jeff Scher, and welcome. Jeff Scher. Jeff teaches critical media literacy and environmental justice at UCLA and the School of Education and Information Studies. He co-authored the Critical Media Literacy Guide in 2019 with Douglas Kellner, and also co-authored Teaching Climate Change to Adolescents in 2017 with Richard Beach and Alan Webb. Antonio Lopez, welcome. Antonio Lopez, PhD, Dr. Lopez has a research focus on bridging eco-justice with media literacy. His most recent book is Ecomedia Literacy, Integrating Ecology into Media Education. Currently, he is an associate professor of communications and media studies at John Cabot University in Rome. Resources and writings are also available at his website, AntonioLopez.com. I believe there's like a little dash there, a dash or hyphen mark there. So please, I'll put that in the chat for us. And so can we please give a warm welcome for our presenters for today? And I must make a note of this before we begin. If you hear the sound of something being cut down, it is. The church has decided to cut a tree across the street, which has been growing for about 70 years. And so as we talk about eco-media literacy and the arts, maybe I'll write a story about it, about how upset I am that this is happening at this point in time. But with that said, please ignore the noise. And without further ado, I turn it over to you.
Well, I'll go ahead and start with mine. So let me jump in, share screen. Great. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. So I want to talk about the ways that in my work, we combine critical media literacy with environmental justice. Current work that I'm really so excited about. First of all, eco-writing, and I'll read the definition that I give to my students. It's when you write about something that resonates deeply about your connection with the natural world. We're using writing as a process of reflection more than communication. The goal of this assignment is to encourage you to think, reflect, and wrestle with your thoughts through writing. There's no length or word count. Any type of writing is acceptable as long as you demonstrate your best effort to reflect and express your thoughts about your relationship with nature. It can be a fictional narrative, short story, a poem, lyrics to a song, a video, a letter, a comic strip, anything but not an academic paper. That's my only rule. And also the term writing, I use the word reading and writing very loosely to talk about any ways that we read or write the world, whether that's actually with letters on a page or with pictures or with sounds. So when I'm talking about eco-writing, it's not just limited to our typical ideas of writing letters on a page. These are a few examples from my students where they wrote poetry, wrote letters, they wrote, one person wrote a whole movie script, so many different ideas. To start off this experience, what I have my students first do is map their own experiences with the natural world. And here are a couple examples that they've done where they need to create a visual map. And I encourage them to be as creative as possible, using all the different art forms that they want to include about their personal experiences with nature. Since they were born, the map should be visual with few of any words, and you can draw it by hand or photograph it or create it digitally. It's very wide open to how they want to interpret this idea of mapping their experiences. So this student, she mapped her experiences just with photographs, and this was her visual map. Then underneath in the notes, I have them post these all on a Google slide. So that way the students all can see each other's work at the same time while they're sharing, while they're doing this. But then in the notes section below the slides, I have them write about it. And let me just move this. So I'm not going to read you what the student wrote, but she did the drawing and then wrote her reflection as well to go along with it. And this is all really part of a pre-writing activity to get them to start just thinking and reflecting on their experiences with nature. And we talk about both the notion of biophilia, that love of nature, and biophobia, that fear of things in the natural world. And we try to be non-judgmental, but to look at these as this is part of our experiences with the world. We need to recognize, reflect on it, and validate everything with the goal of building more biophilia that we can, generating more love of nature. So another activity we'll do then is create a photo trail where they use photography. And this is also for a lot of my students who are in education majors or minors in the undergrad at UCLA, this is a way to also experience place-based education. We talk a lot about kind of the pedagogical benefits. And then I have students explore their environment and reflect on their experiences by using photography as the tool for reflection and communication. So these are a couple images that some of the students created for this project. And then we reflect, we share, we discuss. Here's another picture the student Ben submitted for his photo trail activity. And a lot of it is also about generating dialogue, using media as a tool to be reflective and to encourage deeper critical thinking and analysis. Here's another assignment we do where we have students create visual posters about some type of environmental issue. So we talk a lot about the different ways environmental justice and injustice is represented in media. And then we have them choose, everybody needs to choose their own and create a visual poster. And this is actually a pretty simple assignment where they can do it on Word or in Google Docs. And I just require a title, a border, graphic design that they need to really think visually about how they're communicating, colors, fonts, the whole thing about graphically, visually representing information, and then propose both, summarize a problem and propose a solution in that one poster. And I give them a rubric, I give them examples, and we build these lists. And this is something that the last time we did it, the students not only did their own, but then after they did their own, they worked with middle school students to help them online together to create a joint collaborative poster as well. Here are just some other examples, some of the posters that the students have created, different issues, they need to do some research. And then the hard thing is really trying to make something very short into a brief summary. So it's not this overwhelming, 5-page essay, but still something really meaningful that also can be shared. And we encourage them to share it in their social media and in their schools and different places. Another piece we do is asking them to use the critical media literacy framework and analyze media representations of nature. Where have you seen a positive one and where have you seen a negative one? And then go through the critical media literacy questions of asking, how was it constructed? Who constructed it? Why did they construct it? How could different people understand it differently? Who's benefiting? Who's being hurt by this? That whole kind of critical analysis, as well from looking at popular culture. So all of this is all part of that preparation for their own eco-writing assignment that builds throughout the course. And I'm going to summarize here and just share with you this one website that we use. It's something that we've been building at UCLA with a lot of great resources for free articles, movies, podcasts, lesson plans, all that. And one of the tabs on this looks specifically at climate change and environmental justice. So hopefully these are some tools and some ideas that could be helpful. And I'm going to stop sharing now. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm next. So I need to share my screen. Okay. So everyone see my slide here? All right. I put a QR code here. You can, if you have an app on your phone, you can just scan that. I've also put the web address, and I'll show this at the end of the slideshow. So if you need a minute to open the app, because what I'm going to talk about are video essays, and you really need to see them to really get the full feeling for how valuable this is as an activity. And for obvious reasons, we don't have time to show them to you, but I would encourage you to please take a look at these, and I will talk about some of the examples as I go through this. So I just wanted to build on Jeff's point about the role of critical media literacy, and to talk about just for a second why I call these Ecomedia video essays, because they have to deal with the issues related to the environment and eco-justice. And then eco-media literacy is something that involving a new way of analyzing media from the point of view of both critical media literacy, but also eco-media studies and environmental humanities. So just very briefly, at John Cabot University, which is where I teach the senior capstone course, and I started teaching video essays about 6 years ago as a required assignment for students in the capstone. And the reasoning was it was an emerging activity. I'll define in a minute what video essays are, but something coming out of there's a natural relationship between doing research and then producing research in some kind of video form. And film studies, of course, it makes perfect sense, because if you're going to talk about camera shots, you're going to talk about editing or different sort of aspects of film language, it's very helpful to see it in the form of an actual video essay. And so through a lot of trial and error, I think myself and also the other professors in my program have incorporated it into a lot of our classes, and we really fine tune it and really come up with very good guidelines. So I encourage you to visit our library study guide that we also have created for our students. And you can see the URL at the bottom. So with each bullet point, I also have a screenshot from a video essay made by a student. And so the most important point I want to say about what a video essay is that it's writing with video, building on what Jeff was saying, that, his definition of writing is fairly open. And of course, since we're talking about media, we write with media as well. So a video essay is a short video that illustrates a topic, expresses an opinion, and develops a thesis statement based on research through editing, video, sound, and image. And screenshot of this particular video essay, it was a 9-minute piece. The student analyzed the representations of the environment in Lord of the Rings. So he had to research all the movies that were produced in the series and find the right shots, but also he needed to research about the concept of environmental communication. And so he combined various different elements to produce a beautiful video essay, and it's on the page that I gave the link to at the beginning of this presentation. A video essay production is a valid academic activity that affords multimodal assessment of research, critical thinking, and digital media skills. So in the case of this particular video essay, the student, it's very short, it's I think 4 minutes. She wanted to do an analysis of Instagram influencers who were promoting veganism and food activism, and she analyzed the top 3 vegan influencers and looked at a week of their posts. She did a visual analysis. She analyzed the text. She analyzed the comments. And it's a beautiful, well-produced video essay that also reflects sort of like the style of Instagram. A video essay enables students to develop technical skills while critically analyzing text, telling stories, and utilizing media language. So in this particular video essay, the student analyzed the coverage of the Amazon forest fires in 2019 in the New York Times, but she illustrated it quite beautifully, not only with footage that she found, but she also was quite adept at producing information graphics with After Effects, and she used digital animation tools to sort of visualize different statistics about coverage. And this would be a typical sort of news analysis you might do if you were looking at the coverage of something, but rather than write it as an article or a paper, it's represented visually. They can be made by students and taught with little or no background in media making. So I would like to stress that you don't need fancy programs. I mean, all computers these days have access to free software, and you know, it doesn't take a lot of skill, although it takes practice to do it well. But you can certainly, any student, I've worked with students at all levels, can produce a video essay, and teachers can teach it too. And if you use the study guide that I showed you at the beginning, there's all kind of resources on how to do that. Oh, and I should mention that in this particular video essay, it features the voice of the student more strongly than some of the others, where she put herself in it. You know, students can certainly do that and be creative. And here she wanted to explain a concept, an analytical tool that I developed in my own work called the Ecomedia sphere. And one of the things I've discovered is I have students that have some difficulty with writing papers, and they're quite brilliant, they're smart, they're creative, but they just, you know, they have, they're cognitively diverse, and they can express themselves amazingly beautifully through video essays, but have a lot of anxiety and difficulty through writing. So this could be a good alternative assignment. The example I have here on this page was a student who's a surfer, and I encouraged her to, she has a GoPro and she's a filmmaker, to include herself, because she's very much into surfing, to include her her point of view, while also analyzing the sustainability claims of Patagonia, and looking at their various different videos that they produce on their website, sort of doing a critical media analysis, but also reflecting on her own experience as a surfer. Okay, so the 3 main elements with a video essay is you have images, which can be film footage or found footage or still images, sound, and it can be music and audio, and then words, spoken and written, or either. There's various different genres where you can do only written words, or you could do only spoken, or you could do any kind of combination. But the most important thing, and I think going back to why this is such a valuable assignment for students, is that it really needs to feature the student's voice. I mean, the students shouldn't have an opinion, they should have a point of view, and they should be as creative and engaged as possible within the parameters of the assignment. So this is just a plug for why this is such an particular for environmental and analysis and Ecomedia studies, Ecomedia literacy, why this particular type of assignment is so valuable is that environmentalism is very complex, and visual language is well suited for conveying complexity. And as we know from advertising and social marketing, such as PSAs, you can communicate very difficult issues quite simplistically through visual metaphors, and you can do very holistic environment or analysis through video essays that maybe are more difficult in written word. And finally, I would argue that ecomedia essays are a kind of eco-citizenship, that it could be, the video essays can help educate the public, they can be distributed through social media, and they can raise awareness, so they could have a very positive role in teaching people about the issues that the students care about. So I'm almost done. I just wanted a lot of teachers or professors, whoever, you can use it in high school or undergraduate or graduate level, ask about how do you assess. Well, when I assess both for the traditional things you look for in a paper in terms of research and argument and thesis and evidence, but also evaluate for technical ability. Although I'm fairly loose with that, especially if I know the student is the first time they ever made a video. I'm flexible, but I do let them know in terms of a rubric. I give them feedback on the technical aspects, such as audio, aesthetic choices, edits, things like that. One of the last things I would like to say is just to pay attention to these particular issues that I notice have come up over and over, which is that I think we have a tendency in media studies to focus so much on the visual. We don't think about sound, but sound is half the experience. And if you have bad sound, it ruins the whole experience, in my opinion. So you really need to get students to think about sound in terms of recording their voices, but also mixing the level of their voices with the background. Also using low quality videos. So if people are downloading stuff off of YouTube and it's very pixelated, that's very distracting. Or they use too much text or too many different fonts, or something, a pet peeve of mine is kinetic text, which is text flying all over the place, like the Star Wars. And it's very tempting when students have access to all these special effects to use every trick in the book. And I'm always telling them to please keep it simple, and don't use those special effects whenever possible, and poor transitions. So these are sort of typical technical problems that I come across. Okay, I promised I would put the QR code back there. So if you need to take a picture of that, go ahead and then you can access it. I also put the web address here, and I can throw it in the chat as well during the next presentations, so you can take a look at the video essays on someone else's, on your own time. Okay, that's all. Thank you very much. I pass the baton.
All righty, and I'm just going to also share my screen, and I've got a few things here. So, and please excuse my nonverbals as I go from one screen to the other. Really excited to be here today. And I would like to first acknowledge that I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri and Boorong peoples, who are the custodians of this land. I acknowledge and pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I recognize and I respect their cultural heritage, their beliefs, and their continued relationship to this unceded land, its waters and community, and that these connections are substantiated through oral traditions containing knowledge that should be centered. So today I'm going to be talking about, I think it was a really great segue because Jeff shared a lot of the things about the eco writing and the spirit of that, and really getting people to think about the love of that. And then we had Antonio talking about the technical bits, and I'm going to actually stand as a critical autoethnography and share my story with you. So you get the opportunity to actually see this shared, if you will. So I am my ancestors. I borrow from their methodologies when I use storytelling, poetry, song, creative prose, and digital quilts. These counter narratives are meant to prepare Black children for hegemonic discourse. My grandparents and parents used oral stories as a means for constructing and nurturing the value of the Black spirit. These counter narratives were meant to teach us about the dominant ideologies, the oppressive structures to avoid the media spectacle, while engendering a path toward survival. My art that I'm presenting to you today shines a light at the intersections and at the cracks needing light. I'm going to be sharing a little bit about environmental racism or eco-racism. And it's a form of systematic racism whereby communities of color are disproportionately burdened by health hazards. And very, very specifically, I'm going to be talking about my experiences from home, from the States, but also, and my love for the land, but also my experiences here in Australia. I have 3 pieces, and one of the pieces that I'm going to be sharing focuses on how Australia's Indigenous experts could have helped with the devastating fires, bushfires that we had here. So gather round, whether you're up or down, I'm going to tell you a story from some scraps I've done found. So this is for the first one, the last piece that I'm going to be showing. But my first piece that I'm going to share is a piece of poetry. It's talking about my love for the Chesapeake Bay and all the times that my dad would take us out fishing and we'd vomit outside because my mother would insist on us eating. I stand far from the tidewater gray, but still smell ships of times past from the bay. Feel my toes sponge across receding beach sands, sketched with tattooed chalk-hold lifeline bands, mirroring the Chesapeake's slowing heartbeat, whirled to spot, swimming, and blue-tinted crab feet. My eyes jump land to bridge to land, like earthy fingers of soil, water round a hand. The eastern morning sun sinks into the pine trees. Mosquitoes twirl round a shrinking dark breeze. Look out like a robin wearing a ruddy red vest. Close my eyes, breathing home. I feel blessed. This next one focuses in on the issue of challenges within the Black Belt of the Southern United States, and that has a long history of initially were slavery, but also Black communities and Black communities having not enough money to fight off the industries that are polluting their spaces. Black belt, rich and fertile, all the stories you hold and tell. Your collard greens line my bones. Red cotton stitches my body shell. Black belt, dotted in industry, who bear fruit off Black ill health. Pollution outlines your porch stoops, union towns floating in fecal wealth. Black belt, Southern soil, eyed from Nat Turner to Lone Star. When will the generations of wrist be able to drop dim shackled scars? And this is my last piece, and it has a visual component to it, and it's entitled Burning. Alrighty. This little light of mine, I can't let it shine. It's November 23rd, 2019. Today's my birthday, and while November down under is like May in my Northern Hemisphere mind, this November, I can't smell daisies talking to bees. I can't see birds kissing clouds. Hot and hazy have been sitting on the city, scratching my vision and squeezing my chest, 'cause Australia is burning. This little light of mine, I can't let it shine. It's New Year's Eve and my eyes are fixed on the whiz and pop of the city's fireworks and the whiz and crackle of the bushfires in Gippsland. It's a tale of two peoples, the rich and the ruled, and my asthma and I are sandwiched in between. While ScoMo, the prime minister to industry, sits on the soft sands of Hawaii, stroking his piece of coal while Australia is burning. This little light of mine, I can't let it shine. It's the start of January 2020, and 4,000 pairs of feet stamp the beaches. 4,000 pairs of eyes watched their homes lift and fly in that red sky. 3.7 million acres gone, just a drop of the 46 million cross this flaming island. But behind those pairs of feet sunken in beach sands, 60,000 people displaced from this space, this country of Kanai people, whose knowledge and knowing of different seasons needed centering, 'cause Australia is burning. This little light of mine, I can't let it shine. It was the day of the gray snow, the day I began to hear Dark Emu, Bruce Pascoe, Victor Stephenson fill my ear, said, cool fire, right fire, is water trickling through trees. It brings food, it makes life, if you have kinship with earth, with she. This little light of mine, I can't let it shine. It's nearly November again, and the people on this land girt by sea have begun to plant new seed. But you see, Western fire practice ain't cultural fire practice. You can't hear the difference lest you pick up the receiver. So let's listen to our indigenous host, who the fires impacted the most. They'll share that animal and seed, bugs and bees, human and weather are interconnected together. First Nation knowledge, burning is healing. This little light of mine. Thank you.
Dr. Humphrey, if we're all right on time, I'll take a minute. The chat has a lot of comments related to folks wanting to take a minute to hear the reverberations of Denise's poems.
Yes, we have 24 minutes left, and let's absorb the moment. Let's feel it with all of our senses. I'm actually closing my eyes and meditating on it. Denise made me want to shout. Yes. Let's see, goosebumps and tears. Thank you so much for sharing, Denise. What powerful work. Yes, this is so beautiful. So many thank yous and amazing in the chat and wows and amazing work. What is the song, or is it written by yourself? That's a question for you, Denise.
What is the song?
Yes, the question in the chat is, wow, this is an amazing work. So what is that song, or is it written by yourself?
Oh, well, the poetry was written by me, but that song was "This Little Light of Mine." I just tweaked it to saying "I can't let it shine" instead of "I can let it shine." And it was that particular song was used in protest in the 50s and 60s, and I tried to gospel it up a little. But the rest of it is I guess a la Denise.
Yeah, yeah. Yes. So thank you for that word. Again, we're getting so many favorable comments here in the chat about power and how awesome and integrative to the soul. So again, it speaks to the power of this presentation, the power of our words and the power of song and music. Thank you for that, Denise. Theresa.
Thank you, Amina. I'll go ahead and share my screen now. And I think to pull the thread through, I would suggest that the emotional response that we're feeling is so needed and so missing from our educational environments and structures. And it's not anyone's fault. It's just in the nature of our institutional schooling systems to reside in the realm of alphabetic text rather in the realms of poetry or visual expression. And so I'll end with some information about visual journaling and how it may relate to our work with eco-media literacy. So first, I want to share what visual journaling is. It's a reflective arts-based inquiry technique anchored in multiple fields, namely the visual arts, art therapy, and the expressive arts. Similar to a sketchbook, a journal, an art diary, or an other physical notebook, a visual journal is a place where authors may freely record ideas, experiences, dreams, other thoughts, blank pages. You may have kept a visual journal in the past without even knowing it was called that or could be called that, or you might call it something else. The process of visual journaling is important because it combines images with words, and in this way doesn't privilege one over the other. Instead, it invites and embraces human experience and imagination as the primary focus of the visual journal. So you don't need any artistic skill or training in order to engage in this process. And you can pull your fodder from a variety of materials, including traditional art materials like paints, drawing tools, but also from clips from magazines or books, pages from discarded physical media as well, and more. I will share that before I learned about Jeff's upcoming book in eco writing in every classroom, when we had suggested this presentation, when we proposed it, I hadn't yet started working with Dr. Peaches Hash on a chapter for Jeff's book. And so I do want to shout out Dr. Peaches Hash for her collaboration, as some of these quotes come from that work that's under review right now. So visual journaling as a form of eco-writing can unite students with the natural world in creative and pleasurable ways. And through visual journaling, we may access and cultivate new pathways and possibilities in teaching and learning about climate change and other issues of environmental justice in ways that deepen students' perceptions, perspectives taking, compassion, and advocacy. So get into the emotional space of learning with these issues. I'll go through 4 examples briefly. So exploratory play is possible through visually journaling with the natural world. Very early on, this is my son when he was just 16 months old, exploring the colors and patterns and spaces of natural materials and building that biophilia or ecophilia. Exploratory play can extend to creating structure with outdoor materials. So we've got this goofy person on the left, and on the right, paintings with inspiration from leaves. Moving forward, I use visual journaling with my undergraduate students, and I've used it in the context of media literacy, but within the context of eco-media literacy in particular, I was able to use a guided visual journaling prompt following an introductory lecture based off of Antonio's work, where we looked at the constructs of anthropocentrism and ecocentrism. And the work of that lecture is really emotionally charged for students. They aren't aware of media's impact on the environment, the extraction, the storage, the disposal components, and how planet and people suffer in those in that trajectory. And so using the hand as a frame gave them an opportunity to negotiate their place in that structure in a way that supported their reflection without condemning or suggesting that they were to blame in a way. So you can see this particular piece and the poem that the student chose to craft about this invitation and his actions. Expressive inquiry can be done without a prompt. So that last one was a guided visual journaling prompt in class, but outside of class, students can respond to readings through visual journaling. And as Antonio mentioned, some students are ready to write that essay, while many more he's found are more interested in the video essays. And so similarly, I found that students, even if they don't think so at first, tend to identify the visual journaling process as one that's more holistically and invitational for them to express their learning. And again, you can see the range of materials through these. So we've got a whole range of materials here related to the various works, and students write a brief explanation that explains not only how they're synthesizing their learning, but also their creative choices. So they start to build knowledge about how media can be used as expressive tools. You see poems as well as imagery. And then you can move into the arena of counter-narrative storytelling, which is the action piece that we encourage in media literacy and eco-media literacy. So here's the advertisement from T-Mobile telling you the next best thing is here. And here's the comment saying, yeah, what is the next best thing? Where is this sense of perception that makes us feel like what we have is obsolete? It's about the emotional feelings that drive us to consume that next great thing. An iPhone 13 is coming out, so we're seeing a lot of this. And then finally, you can use visual journaling as an educator in your curriculum planning. So after working with the hand framing in the visual journaling prompt that I used with students, I was processing how I needed to develop and shift my practice in the next semester and revise. Artography is a way of visual journaling that moves beyond curriculum planning to represent how we negotiate our identities as artists, researchers, and teachers in academia and higher education in particular. So we can use artography as a visual journaling process to negotiate our research and how we are engaging in those three spaces. So here's our two examples of artographical spreads, you could call them. And then finally, in your personal practice, you can use visual journaling in many ways, purposeful or not. In many contexts that I describe visual journaling, I try to get away from the word purpose. The process is the purpose, not the product. In this sense, in the expressive arts, we call it low skill, high sensitivity. So anyone can do this. It's a radical democratizing practice. And you can incorporate writing and poetry as well into your visual journaling as personal practice. So I'll end by suggesting that visual journaling is a way of immersing oneself in slow looking. And Antonio describes this in his works. And I've learned about this through him, although it's credited to another scholar as well. But through the process of slow looking, students are invited into this reflective and generative experience that personally and relationally immerses them in emotional, cognitive, and somatic kinds of experience in the world, allowing them to process issues through intuition and intentional expression. And Antonio defines slow media as an important aspect of ecomedia pedagogy in particular. So if you want to start trying some visual journaling with your students, no matter the age, focus on the reality of their expression being the purpose. It's not about artistic expertise. Low skill, high sensitivity. Not about products, it's about process. Incorporate written reflection, poetry, audio, other modes to enhance opportunities for students to explain their thinking, including not just what they are processing, but also the creative choices that help them communicate. And that's where the perspectives taking comes into play as well. The metacognitive process of identifying how you're conveying something to another person is an important piece of this. And provide space for both guided visual journaling during classes, as well as extended opportunities for expression outside of classes that is out of bounds. And students will impress you with the ways they run with this prompt, the openness of the prompt. All right, and those are my references for folks to consider.
Thank you so much. Can we give a warm reaction for all of our presenters today? At this time, we have about 13 minutes for questions from the audience. We want to hear from you. We have been given some really powerful words and understandings about critical media literacy, but specifically eco-media literacy and the arts. And so let's hear from you. Audience, please, let's engage. And if necessary, I can also provide questions for our group too, at least one. There's one pressing one that I really want to ask, and then maybe we can hear more from the audience. But thinking about what has been presented today, can you share more in regards to eco-media literacy and visual and performing arts? The possibilities of eco-media literacy and discussing even more. We've seen a little bit of it today with your presentations, but can we delve into it more? Eco-media literacy arts and visual performing arts.
Well, I'd love to jump in and also share that I popped in the chat some links to Bruce Pascoe's book and TED Talk, because I really need to center and acknowledge that knowledge, that First Nation knowledge. But as for me as an academic and working with students who are in early childhood and who are going into early childhood and elementary or primary, where I am, primary schools to teach, I get the opportunity to talk to them about children's literature. Children's literature. What is it good for? Absolutely everything. and so we always sing that song, and so the poetry that I shared, I might share intermittently through class, and but many of the children's picture books that they get to experience and to critique, using many of the questions that my colleagues here in the panel also shared, they get a sense. They're like, oh, this is a poem. This is a poem. I could actually speak to this. I'm like, yes. And so I'm really excited because it gives students the opportunity to think that I don't have to necessarily be able to draw a really fancy picture, but I could create something digitally that I use some type of app that looks like I've sketched it out, and pop it on the other side, a piece of, one line from a poem. Many of the books just behind me they're just poems.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And thank you for sharing that. I want to turn to the chat here. We have some engagement from the audience. From Rachel, all of these assignments are a clear departure from traditional assignments found in neoliberal academy. How do students receive this new way of knowing? Have you had to convince students that this actually counts as learning? How do you address assessment, which is in most cases a required part of formal education? So which part of that multi-layered questions would you like to respond to? And this is for
I
the
can
group.
make it quick.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, I want to say two quick things. One is, one of the problems we have when we talk about the environment is that people do not feel it the way that we need to be feeling it. This is not just an intellectual thing that's going on. There's something very strongly that we're experiencing, a lot of grief, a lot of anger, frustration. So art is a good way to grapple with that in ways that maybe traditional academic work doesn't do that. But in terms of assessment, I mean, I think I shared with you the rubric that I use. I mean, you can assess a creative project, but you can also have a paper that goes with it where the students have to describe their process and show their research. And you can have many steps where they're demonstrating along the way different things that you normally would assess in a traditional academic way. So there's many different opportunities to assess the work. So I'll let someone else also speak.
I'd love to jump in on this one because I've used visual journaling in class, and then I expanded it to an outside of class process where students would create this graphical representation throughout the semester of all of that we were studying, not just eco-media literacy, which is part of my larger media literacy course. And at the end of the semester, students do interviews because my work's part of this bigger research project. And some students have said that they weren't too keen on it to begin with, or they didn't think they were going to like that part. They've also suggested it feels real elementary in their undergraduate students. So I have gotten some of that reaction. And I think that because learning experiences have been so conventional and have privileged alphabetic text and writing responses, students maybe are undeveloped perhaps in that arena, or maybe they're developed, but they haven't had a chance to practice those skills in the classroom. And so what overwhelmingly happens is throughout the course of the semester, if they engage in maybe 10 of these visual journaling experiences, they start to identify, they're shared in a common forum on the LMS. They always explain how thrilled they are to see how other people are interpreting and processing and reflecting on ideas. So there's this cross-pollination, this perspectives taking, this ability to stand in someone else's shoes and see through their eyes that happens. And that surprised even me. So I'll just suggest that is a piece of my experience, the initial resistance and then the eventual understanding of how multifaceted and rich the experience is for them as learners.
Thank you. And in the chat, we have some more questions. Some students have minimal opportunities to engage with nature. How do you address that?
I think we got to be careful about our judgments about other people. Because even in inner city schools I've worked at where it's all cement and hardscape, there's nature, it's around us, it's the birds, it's the airs, it's the bugs, it's the rats, whatever it is, there is nature all around us. And it's about really kind of building that awareness.
Also, I try to problematize this idea that there's a boundary between nature and not nature, which I think gets people kind of hung up on, like not recognizing that, like Jeff was pointing out, that we have nature everywhere and that nature is not something out there. I think Faith was mentioning the fact that, there's this sort of trope in fairy tales that the forest is the scary place, the wild place. And that's kind of an othering, that it's somewhere, it's away from us, and somewhere elsewhere it's a dark place that we don't have access to, but it's all around us. And we're all also animals, and, sort of try to cultivate the awareness that we are also part of nature.
Thank you for that. This question from the chat, Theresa, that is an impressive work and research. Congratulations. I really like the way you work the art with your students. I would like to know, how did you develop those books, or in which program? And how was your students' experiences?
I feel like I may have already commented on this when I was responding to how they reacted to visual journaling. So I'll just clarify that the images were scans from their visual journals and not from a common book. So I don't know if that was a misconception with my slides. But they react favorably at the experience. Some even suggest that they're able to step out of the rigor of their other academic work and engage in the journaling as a form of wellness, practice of wellness, although I would still suggest it's rigorous.
Yeah.
I'd like to just add the importance of this work in terms of media production and empowerment, because looking at environmental injustice, environmental racism is very important, but can also be depressing if we don't give them opportunities to do something. And eco writing could be a fabulous opportunity for them to be able to take action, do something, and really feel like this is something we can respond to.
Faith says here in the chat, I've been amazed at how many children's books, especially fairy tales and fantasies, make the forest into a scary place. And then we wonder why kids have a fear of natural spaces and things. From Rachel, thank you, panelists. I love to use these approaches in the future. Your insights are so helpful in thinking about how to integrate all of these. And I will say to all of us, we have 3 minutes before our session ends, and I would like to let you know that we want to hear from everybody. So please make sure in the final 3 minutes that you are able to pose your questions or comments. Please, the chat and beyond. And panelists, do you have any final thoughts too?
I just want to say how amazing it's been engaging with everyone here, but Antonio, Jeff, Theresa, it's just been really exciting, and it gets you. I'm always excited about creating art, right? Because it's your art. As a friend of mine, I was reading my poetry to her last night because it's morning Monday here, and she said, "Girl, this is your art. There's no right or wrong. It's yours." And so it's about being able to share that feeling that you have in your heart. And to be able to get it out there, whether it's not about whether it's right or wrong. And so I think it's about how much you're expressing. And Theresa had talked about the process, that the process is the important part and not so much the product.
But again, I'll just pull that thread and suggest that, for my purpose, which was pedagogical, it was really about process. But then I think about your work, Denise, and I hadn't had the opportunity to hear your work before. And I think that's where the action piece Jeff brought up earlier comes into play. Through that active counter-narrative storytelling, there's this engagement of audience, and then the audience is moved into action, ideally, and whether that's personal or community-based. Thank you.
And it was kind of interesting. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Antonio. I was just going to say that I had to do some history to make sure that I was shored up on. I was like, wait, do I remember this? Did I get this right? Antonio, sorry.
Yeah, just to reemphasize something I said earlier in my portion of the presentation is, in the case of the video essay, but I think in all the examples that were given during the panel, the student voice is so strongly present. More like, it's always present in a paper when they write a paper, but when you hear their voice in the narration, or you see their hand in the drawing, or you see their face, they're really there. And I think that's so important, because they also, having a voice lets them know that they can have a voice in the world.
And it's not that they don't have voices, but like Antonio and everybody saying, this is an opportunity to validate, help them, counter all those negative stories and messages that they're getting that are telling them they don't count. So it's this wonderful opportunity.
And with that said, we are at 2:30. I want to say that if you look in the chat, you will see all of these complimentary words and thank yous in regards to what has been shared today. And so I want to say to the group,
Thank you to you. Amina, we didn't get a chance to say thank you to you. Excuse me, I'm going to jump in and
thank you,
interrupt.
Hey, Amina.
We got to give you a hand. Thank you.
I have the
We
giggle.
feel your joy.
I wasn't expecting a shout out, but I'll take it. I'll receive the gift. So thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Thank you all for coming out today and sharing with us too as well. And just know, please continue to share about this conference and to spread the word on social media. We so appreciate you and thank you so much. And please have a great day.